Hi everybody, it's Lindsay. I'm trying a new experiment. I'm going to see what happens if I do a little bit of a video to go along with our weeks. I was discussing this with one of you this week, and it seemed like an idea that might be worth doing. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go along. But for now, I want to do just a little bit of a run through about the course, things that you may have probably picked up on if you've been poking around in the Moodle, but also just to clarify a few things. And I can clarify anything you like. That's one of the reasons why I've started to add a new section to our week discussions where it's questions for Lindsay, because there may be things that come up along the way, and that's a great place for me to see it. Okay, so I think you've probably all taken a good look at the site, but one of the things that's a feature of the design that I have been using for the last little while when I've been using Moodle is a top section where I can put things like the welcome note that I mailed out to you guys in December. Hopefully most of you got that. Some people are new to the group, so you may not have got that, but mostly it just said welcome and that there was more to come. The course outline, as well as a few useful things like the initial information sheet that you need to fill in before you have your phone conversation with me, the link for signing up for a phone conversation with me. All of you should be doing that. I would hope by the end of this week, sign up for it at least, because we need to get those conversations in so that you have enough time to actually write your proposal for me, which is due on January 30th, it says right there. After you've had your phone conversation with me, then you need to fill in the cover sheet and proposal for your inquiry project, and I try and mark those as fast as possible and get them back to you so you can get started on your inquiry project. Most of them will be just fine, and I'll give you the green light, but some of them I may have to get you to do a little bit of rethinking or editing on, or I'll make some suggestions that sort of need to be followed through on before you carry on. In terms of your first assignment, one of you was great and reminded me that actually I needed to upload one other document to make it handy here. There's the Foundations for the Atlantic Canada Language Arts curriculum, so that's just a curriculum document, and then there's Shiro, who talks about ideologies of curriculum, and Shiro is actually a reading, I think, for week 3, I'm pretty sure, so you actually get a fair amount of time to dig in with that, and you get to do kind of a dry run on it before you actually have to hand it in with each other. Rubrics that I generally use, people who know me know that I'm a big fan of the 6+1 Traits of Effective Writing, which is a rubric that was developed by a team of writing teachers out in Oregon, I believe, and it took many, many, many years for them to create it, and I find it very, very versatile, that I could use it with elementary age students, but I could also use it with graduate students. It covers a lot of different bases that I think are important. The rest are draft rubrics, meaning that you may have ways that you want to weigh in on these to make them more useful for the project that you are doing. But these are linked to projects that I've done with people in the past. For instance, an interactive workshop. Sometimes people want to do an inquiry like that, or a narrated video, or a podcast, or an illustrated literature review. The next section says exemplars, and I need to upload some things in there, but those are to come. In terms of this last week, just to sort of give a little bit of discussion about what was going on. I loved seeing all your introductions and reintroductions, and I loved seeing how interactive you were. I think that there were 72 posts or something like that when I finally got to opening them all, which means that you're having a lot of chat already, which I love. And I hope that the folks who were together in the summer will extend themselves to the new folks who have joined us or who weren't able to be with us in the summer. In the next section, you talked a little bit about your ideas about curriculum, and that was fantastic. What I saw there was a lot of variety and a lot of diverse ways of thinking about curriculum, sometimes as something that's fairly solid and is handed down to you, and sometimes as something that is really organic and is really a living thing, which I thought was super interesting. Ray spoke of it as a map and talked about taking the highlighter out and putting that on the map. And then I thought, oh, I wonder how that changes when we now have Google Earth. Is that kind of what's going on for us now when we start thinking about curriculum as an ever-evolving thing, because they keep on adding more things to it. Um, so that's one of the things I was thinking about as I was reading through your thoughts about curriculum. I next asked you guys to read an article by Ween and Dudley Marling that I think is a fantastic article for really sort of sketching out two different approaches to curriculum. I'm pretty sure we used this in the summertime because I think that I told the story of Reggio Emilia, and I think that it actually got me a little bit teary when I talked about it. But for those of you who don't know, Reggio Emilia is a province in Italy where they have had huge success with their early years education, and it's really something that's followed around the world, and many places are now trying to say that they're Reggio inspired. But the history of beginning the schools there, beginning the preschools there, really comes at the end of the Second World War when, as the fascists were retreating, they left behind, I think it was a tank and maybe a horse or two or something like this. And the people in the village thought, well, we could actually sell this, particularly the tank, we could sell this metal and get some money. And then they had a sort of town discussion about, so what do we want to use this money for? And one of the ideas was that they could create a theater. Oh, I did it again. I'm getting all choked up about this. Or they could create a school, and they decided to create a preschool that was going to be really dedicated to creating a humane education, with the idea that they never wanted the kinds of things that they had seen going on in the Second World War to happen again. So that's some of the history behind Reggio, which I think is quite moving to think of human beings getting together and making those kinds of decisions. So one of the really neat things as I read through the questions and discussion that you guys had about Reggio is that a lot of you were replying to each other about things, even though I hadn't actually asked you to do that. And I thought that was fantastic, although I don't expect it. So quite often I will ask you to post something, and I won't necessarily ask you to reply to it, in part because sometimes that can feel like busy work. I love for there to be interaction. I love for there to be conversation, but sometimes it can feel like if it's forced, like it's like, oh, now I have to post about something. I understand that that can take away from some of the authenticity. So I won't always be asking you to reply to somebody. That may be the way you've been doing your other online courses, but I just wanted to let you know that I don't always expect it. I then put it through in a little stretching exercise, which I have to say I am really happy that I chose to use the Google Doc, because then I get to see all the stream of beautiful pictures, and they are so lovely, the things that you guys have uploaded and said in there. At first I thought I was going to use just a Moodle form, and I thought, no, it's so sweet to see everything all together, and it really gets a sense of, I don't know, who we are as a whole group. So thank you of everyone who has managed to put up a photo there. There have been some really lovely things. In terms of lingering questions, so at a certain point, I think, yes, it was probably during my conversation with Olaf, he said to me, I'd like to hear about, your thoughts on these things. And I was like, oh, okay, and that's where I started thinking about creating this kind of a video. So I added, after my conversation with Olaf, I added this lingering questions section, and I put up a spot for people to ask questions for me. But what I absolutely love is that instead, the group, Andrew posted a question to the group, and a ton of people had things to say about it. And there was a huge discussion there about hutology. Hutology? I don't actually even know how to say that word, but I found that fabulous. And in some ways, I think that question connected so well also to the reading, because so many people identify, the Reggio approach is much more of a student-centered approach than other approaches might be. And that's one of the things when Andrew and I were talking on the phone, he was sort of explaining more to me about that approach. I would say I do agree with the word being off-putting, because it's something very German-sounding to me, which there's nothing against Germany. That's not the issue. No, Olaf, that's not what I'm saying. I just feel it doesn't slip off the tongue that easily, and I do feel like it could, as Lisa kind of noted, put distance between people who are really interested in the idea. However, I do love the kind of work that you guys are doing here, explaining it to us, and I love that you're interested in it because obviously it is the kind of thing that I am also interested in. One of the questions that Sherry had for Andrew was, do you think that Reggio could be used at the adult level? And I think that that's exactly what I hope to see happen. And definitely what I felt was maybe happening in the summer. For those of you who weren't with us in the summer, I did feel like that was the most organic course that I have ever taught in terms of being able to, every evening I was reflecting on what had happened that day, and I redesigned what we did during the week based on what had happened, and my conversations with you all, and the kinds of questions that I was getting from you that you were actually interested in. So there were a few things that stayed in place, but, and I did know in my mind some things that were important to me that I wanted us to cover. However, the way we got there tended to shift depending on my read of the room and what I felt was really important at that moment in time, rather than sort of a course that was designed down to the last second and delivered without any sense of who was in the room. In fact, I would say that I did design the course down to the last second pretty well before we started, and then it all shifted. So that's maybe some background knowledge that you may or may not know about our time together. Anyways, I think I've probably gone on long enough about this last week, but I would just say a little bit about what's coming up next week, or this week now. You're already in this week. Ooh, look, we've already got some postings happening there. Once again, I'm not asking you to reply to people at this point. I'm still just getting you to do some sifting through resources and posting, and then there's some space. Oh, look, already there's questions for the group. So that's some of the things that you might keep in mind. You don't have to reply to people just every week. But the other thing that I would say in terms of the course is that although I have the titles for all of the classes right down to the end, and I actually have designed right down to the end, it was in conversation with one of you, I believe, and then going on a walk to go get groceries that I thought, no. Yes, it was in conversation, I think with Patricia, actually, early on, one of my first conversations, thinking about some of the redesign for the later part of the course. So I have made it so that you can't actually see it. You know, on mine, I can see it, but it's all blanked out for you guys at this point. And I am making final decisions about how those last weeks are going to go. Anyways, that is the end for me. I made a promise to myself that I was going to try and do this in one take and not belabor it, because I do actually want to get these out there as easily as possible. So I beg forgiveness for all the ums and the stuttering, but I felt like I wanted to see if I could make this just a habit of something that I do, and I will hopefully get better at it. Thanks, everybody.